Hello everyone. Thank you all for watching the video and leaving meaningful comments. Wishing everyone good health and happiness.
In the early morning, as the first rays of sunlight slipped through the forest canopy, lytuca rose from her sleep. The distant crow of roosters echoed, a familiar call that stirred the mountains awake. She stepped outside, her bare, callous feet touching the cold earth, her heart tinged with a quiet unease. Today wasn't just any day. Her husband, Khanh, was to be released from prison early for good behavior. She picked up the corn grinder, her hands turning it steadily, the rhythmic crunch blending with the restless clucking of chickens and ducks, mirroring the beat of her heart, part anticipation, part apprehension. She glanced back into the house, where her little child still slept soundly on the simple bamboo bed. The child's lips moved faintly, perhaps lost in a sweet dream. Tuer smiled, a tender smile heavy with unspoken emotions. To her, this child was her light, the reason each day wasn't just about enduring. She poured the ground corn into a basket, scattering it for the chickens and ducks, her mind drifting to the days ahead. Khanh had been gone for so long she'd stopped counting the days. Yet every moment of his absence left an emptiness in their small home. She once believed that if she loved enough, endured enough, happiness would return. Now, with his release imminent, she wasn't sure if her heart still held enough warmth to mend the old cracks. The chickens and ducks chirped around her, but her soul felt as still as a morning lake. After tending to the animals, she returned inside to prepare breakfast for her child. Her hands moved deftly, lighting the fire, the smoke curling upward with the familiar scent of dry wood. She watched the flames, her heart tugging at memories of days past, when Khanh was still here, fixing the hut with her, holding their child by the glowing hearth. Today he'd return. Could it all begin anew? She didn't dare hope too much, but deep within, a faint spark flickered. The child stirred, calling out for her in a sleepy babble. Tuer lifted the little one, pressing a soft kiss to its forehead, a warmth blooming in her chest. She fed the child spoonfuls of porridge, humming an old lullaby as she did. Her voice was gentle, carrying a love too vast for words. When they finished, she wiped her hands, tied back her hair, and hoisted the basket onto her shoulder. The forest path awaited her as it did every day, long and steep, but today her steps carried a different weight. She left the house, her small figure fading behind the trees. Meanwhile, Khanh had been released. The vehicle dropped him off on the village's red dirt road. He stepped out, his eyes wide with disbelief as he took in the familiar sights. The village hadn't changed, but he had, thinner, more weathered. Instead of heading home, he turned toward the homes of old friends. Laughter and chatter filled the air as he knocked on doors. He asked after them, shared stories, as if delaying the moment he'd face Tuer. Perhaps he was afraid. Afraid of her gaze, afraid of the questions she'd never voiced. He stood under a friend's porch, holding a cup of hot tea, but his heart felt cold. He knew he'd left her with too much pain. Meanwhile, near noon, Tuer returned from the forest. The basket on her back was heavy, her shirt soaked with sweat, yet her steps remained steady. She looked up at the sky, the sun now harsh, and told herself to hurry home to cook. She didn't know Khanh was already in the village, somewhere among the conversations with friends. She entered the house, set the basket down, and let out a long breath. Her child ran to her, clinging to her legs with a radiant smile. Tuer ruffled the little one's hair, her heart easing slightly. She rekindled the fire, preparing lunch. The scent of fresh rice mingled with the crackle of firewood, a simple symphony of life. In her heart, a nameless anticipation stirred. She thought of Khanh, of his release. Would he come straight home? Did he still remember this house, her, their child? She didn't dare guess, only worked in silence, letting time reveal the answers. She stood there by the fire, her small frame resolute and strong. Out there, Khanh still hadn't returned. He wandered from house to house, from lane to lane, as if postponing the inevitable. He didn't know that in that little home Tuer was waiting, not with grand hopes, but with a fragile thread of faith. Episode 7, Scene 2. The moment of confrontation. The midday sun softened, and the scent of freshly cooked rice wafted from the small kitchen, mingling with the aroma of cabbage-wrapped meat that lytuca was carefully preparing. She sat there beside a simple meal, her hands rolling each leaf, her eyes lighting up as she watched her little child giggle brightly. For her, these moments were rare pockets of peace amid life's storms. She set out the meal, for humble dishes yet warm with care, as if whispering to herself that she was still living, still enduring for her child. Outside the threshold, a figure appeared silently. Khanh had returned, but he didn't dare step inside. He stood behind the door, hiding like a stranger, his eyes red and teary as he peered through a narrow gap. He saw Tuer feeding their child, her gentle voice rising softly, each spoonful of rice carrying a world of love. He stood there, his heart-twisting tears streaming down his weathered cheeks, each drop falling like shards of a past he couldn't reclaim. The child suddenly looked up, its clear eyes catching sight of him. It broke into an innocent smile, its tiny hand waving with delight, as if calling its father home. That smile pierced Khan's heart like a sharp blade. He remembered the days he'd held it, promising to give it the world with all the faith of a father. But now he was just a faded shadow standing outside, gazing at the happiness he'd let slip through his fingers. His tears fell harder, hot and bitter. He turned his face away, wiping them with his hand, but his heart remained heavy as stone. He looked at Tuer, the wife who'd waited for him through those long months, who'd gone hungry to feed their child. She was still there, tender and resilient, like a forest breeze that never ceased. But what had he done but leave her with wounds too deep to heal? Tuer hadn't noticed him yet. She was lost in play with their child, her laughter ringing out, as if her pain had momentarily drifted to sleep. She told the little one about mornings in the forest, her voice clear as a cool stream. Khanh stood outside hearing every word, his heart tearing apart. He wanted to step in to hold them both, but his feet felt bound by regret. He asked himself, "Am I still worthy?" The question echoed in his mind, a cold wind blowing through his empty soul. He thought of the promises he'd made to Tuer, words spoken in the lonely nights. But he hadn't kept them, and now he was just a man peering at his family through a crack in the door. He turned away, stepping off the porch, his heart weighed down by a mountain of remorse. With each step he glanced back, at Tuer, at their child, at the little home that once meant everything. His tears still fell, soaking into the earth, blending with the dust of the village path. He walked farther, his thin frame fading down the road, leaving behind a quiet void no one could see.